Nutrition, Chapter 15, Diet and Health. This is Martha Olson. As we look at nutrition and the effect on chronic disease, Healthy People 2020 really helps us to know that you can increase the quality and years of a healthy life by good health habits, and that includes diet. We know that diseases are considered either short-term acute or the long-term chronic, and we know some of the leading causes of death in the United States are cardiovascular disease and cancer. Our food choices are more likely to affect our risk for developing some of the chronic diseases we have. And obesity has become a huge issue here in the United States and worldwide, actually, looking at the risk for coronary heart disease, our cancers, diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome are all affected by the obesity epidemic that we're seeing. We know the primary concern is overweight and obesity for our health, not necessarily the looks, but more of the overall health of the person. Excess body fatness rather than body weight is what's linked to increased risk. And inactivity has become a big part of that as we have more computers and more sedentary activities. It becomes a risk factor for heart disease as related to blood pressure increases, smoking, and higher cholesterol. We're going to look at genetics in this unit, and as we look at our genetics, we know that the National Institute of Health is spearheading some of the genetic information that we are having out there. The main goal is to understand how our genes influence our risk of the disease that we have, and our clues to our genetic variations that are responsible for some of these illnesses. Genetics being, your uncle and your brother died of colon cancer at a very early age, you're at a higher risk. Breast cancer in women, they look at family, health history to help determine what are your risk factors, and that helps us with earlier screening and some of the genetic testing that they're able to do today. We know that all diseases have some genetic component, and most occur because of that interaction with genetics as well as environment, nutrition, and lifestyle factors. So it all plays a factor. There's not any one responsible factor for that. Most cancers seem to be caused by, a variety of things that we're doing. The Human Genome Project was finished. It was a 13-year effort that was coordinated by the Department of Energy and the National Institute of Health to map out the human genome. And we look at the genetics. We know that to understand that helps researchers to give more effective medications. They are now making medications that are specifically fit for a person's genetics, and specifically the cancer treatments. As we look at genetics and disease, then we know that there are influences. The new science is called nutritional genomics, and the influence on that gene expression for our diet will increase our understanding of how it affects our body and how our body functions. When we look at genetics, we know that, remember, the DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's that long corkscrew shaped double helix that we see with the sugar and phosphate and the base pairs that line up. The errors in the code may be harmless, or errors in our genetic code may also lead to some of our serious diseases that we see. In pathophysiology, there are several chapters just solely related to genetics, and it's a good place to learn about that. And I believe now for most of the BSN programs, Bachelors of Science in Nursing, you have to have at least a semester of a genetics class. So the importance of genetics is being seen with curriculum changes and also with a lot of the healthcare issues that we see going on today. And we know diet is enhanced or inhibited by some of that gene expression. Looking at cancer in this unit then, it's the second leading cause of death. It's a group of more than 100 diseases, and we know that these cancer cells keep dividing when new cells are not needed, and extra cells then form what we call a tumor, and they can metastasize out into other parts of the body. Benign is not cancerous, it does not spread, but the malignant is the bad one that's abnormal, and it divides out of control. They're kind of like cells that break away, and they get out either via the blood or the lymph into the other parts of the body and cause their cancer cells then to set up shop in those foreign places. The multi-stage cancer cells, we look at the initiation. Something alters that genetic structure that initiates or starts that cancerous change. Then promotion is that reversible stage where initiation of the cells to divide. And then when we get to the progression stage, it's the promoted cells multiply and invade that healthy tissue. Our risk factors are listed here. You know, there's a lot of things we can do knowing that we can decrease the risk of cancer. My grandma died of throat cancer. She was a smoker, but back then they didn't know that, you know, smoking caused throat and esophageal cancer. As a kid, we used to lay out in the sun and get suntanned. We'd get sunburnt, not really understanding the risks of skin cancer. So as we learn more about some of the environmental and lifestyle risks, we can alter the things that we do. We also do know that certain viruses increase the risk for cancers. Cancer is not considered a contagious disease, but thinking about it in a viral way, we have now come up with some antivirals for young women. The immunizations they get before being sexually active to help decrease some of the cervical cancers. Cancer then is caused by changes in those mutations in the genes that control that normal cell growth and also the cell death. There is a link. I had read at one time 20 to 30% of cancers are due to our food choices and lack of physical activity. And adding fat into the diet increases the risk for our GI, colon, rectal, also prostate and endometrial cancers. Red meat has specifically been looked at, and our processed meats such as hot dogs are foods that we want to use very much in moderation because they are linked with our cancers. So increasing the whole grains helps decrease breast cancer and also colorectal cancer. Looking at diet, again, our whole grains, legumes, or your beans, decreasing the fat. Switching gears now, we want to talk about osteoporosis. We often think of calcium as the part of, you know, prevention of osteoporosis, but we know that it is also your vitamin A, vitamin D, and then exercise is part of prevention for this. When we look at calcium, we know that that gives bone strength. Vitamin D is there because it helps calcium be absorbed better. Vitamin A weakens bones in excess, so we want to make sure that we aren't overdosing in vitamin A. And then we know that women and people over 128 pounds that exercise get what we call weight-bearing exercise. A very small-framed, low-weight person, when they exercise, they don't get the benefit of that weight bearing to help prevent osteoporosis as we do with people that are 128 pounds or more. At age 75, we know 1/3 of all men have osteoporosis, so it's not just a woman disease. And we know then vulnerable areas are the hip, spine, and wrists. And it is also called a silent disease simply because you don't have a lot of problems that alert you to the fact that your bones are weakening and becoming very porous, and if you fall you may fracture and break them. Bone strength depends on the bone density, bone quality. Bone density is by peak bone mass, and that is built throughout your life. After age 30, bone density does not improve, so you want to hopefully just maintain the density of the bone. And then bone quality is the turnover and the accumulation of, you know, the minerals and the mineralization in the bone. As we look then at some of the women's health, we know that women have some specific nutritional needs and are more vulnerable for things just because of the hormones and the childbearing that we have throughout our lifetime. And then as we look at our diet with that cancer link, they are looking at that dietetic professionals being very actively involved in promoting good nutrition, helping people understand, you know, that the high intake of red meat such as beef, pork, and lamb and our processed meats are associated with some of our colorectal cancers, and we need to learn to limit those in our diet. As we look also at weight loss. Modest of 5 to 15% of total body weight for somebody that's obese does reduce the risk of many of the heart and health problems that we do see very commonly in our society today as more and more people are obese. And the last two slides are just looking at the structure of DNA. We know then that there are a lot of things with genetics, and so our assignment for this case study for this unit is going to be to look at your family genetics. And as you see a picture of myself in there, you can build these any way you want if you're good with Microsoft Word. Otherwise, you can just, kind of map it out. But look at your family and talk to your parents or your relatives and find out, what did people in your family have? You may be kind of impressed to find out that there are health history things that aren't talked about or you weren't aware of because you just never asked. Then you're going to write 2 paragraphs and you're going to explain what you learned and what you're going to change in your life. So if you find out that, there's a lot of diabetes, you see my grandpa was a diabetic and wound up having a stroke. For me, knowing that and that type 2 diabetes runs very strongly in family genetics, I have my blood sugar checked, I have my A1C checked, I really try to exercise and eat a low fat, low carb diet, just knowing that that diabetes is there throughout my family tree and what I need to do today to make changes in a positive way so that either I don't get diabetes or if I do get diabetes, I'm in a lot healthier way to prevent some of the long-term complications that go with that. So this is a case study where you are going to do some studying at your own personal genetics. As I say in the directions for this assignment, don't share anything that you're not comfortable with, but also we are not going to be sharing this with anybody else. So hopefully you will find out some good things about your genetics and write 2 paragraphs about what you learned, what you need to eat, and what you can do in your lifestyle to set yourself up to have better health. This ends our diet and health unit.